October 23rd, 1945, 2:15 in the morning, Saipan, Mariana Islands. The basement door exploded inward. American boots, heavy, deliberate. The sound of wood splintering echoed through darkness like bones breaking. Inside, pressed against concrete walls, slick with condensation and fear, 47 Japanese women gripped their weapons, broken chair legs, mess kit spoons filed to points on stone, twisted pieces of rebar scavenged from bombed buildings. Not much, but enough to die fighting, enough to avoid what came next. They had rehearsed this moment in whispers, planned it during long nights hiding in ruins. Each woman knew her role. First row attacks, second row follows, third row uses the chaos to end themselves quickly. Better that way, better than what the propaganda films had shown them, better than dishonor. Amiko Hayashi stood at the front, 34 years old. Head nurse before the world ended. Mother to a daughter named Yuki, who was 7 years old and loved drawing flowers and would never see her mother again. Wife to a soldier who was probably dead in some Chinese field, his body unburied, his name forgotten. She held 2 feet of iron rebar. Rust flaked off in her palm. The weight felt wrong, too light for what it needed to do, too heavy for what she could manage with a damaged knee. But it was what she had. It was all any of them had. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness like judgment itself, bright, blinding. Emiko squinted, raised the rebar. Behind her, 46 women raised their own pathetic weapons. Some cried, some prayed, most simply stood, silent, accepting. This was death. This was the moment propaganda had promised. The moment when American demons would reveal their true nature. When captured Japanese women would understand why suicide had been the better choice. But the Marine at the front lowered his flashlight, 22 years old maybe. Baby-faced, Midwest farm boy features. Wholesome, the kind of young man who should be harvesting corn, not leading soldiers into basements full of desperate enemies. He spoke, English, calm, almost gentle. The tone of someone giving directions, not orders. The voice of someone uncomfortable with what he was doing, but doing it anyway because duty demanded it. A second man stepped forward, older, Japanese features, a Nisei translator, Japanese-American, caught between 2 identities, 2 impossible worlds, wearing an American uniform but speaking Japanese like it hurt his throat. He translated 5 words, 5 impossible, incomprehensible words that made less sense than surrender itself. Ma'am, we're here to help. Help, the word landed like a bomb, exploded in the space between enemy and prisoner, between expectation and reality, between what they knew and what was happening. Help made no sense. The enemy didn't help, Americans didn't offer assistance, demons didn't bring aid. This was strategy, psychological warfare. Make them lower their weapons, make them trust, then strike. But the Marines weren't carrying rifles, medical kits, canvas bags with red crosses painted on them, canteens of water that sloshed when soldiers moved, folded blankets, stretchers, bandages visible in open packs, the tools of healing, not killing. The young corporal gestured toward the supplies, spoke again through the translator, his voice steady, professional, like he was checking off items on a list rather than negotiating with armed enemies. We have water, food, medical treatment. The war is over. You are prisoners now. Geneva Convention applies. We're taking you to a facility for processing. Geneva Convention, Emiko knew the term, international agreement about prisoner treatment. Japan had signed it years ago but never followed it, never ratified it. The Japanese military taught that surrender was disgrace worse than death, that prisoners deserved nothing because honorable soldiers didn't become prisoners. But America followed the convention, even when their enemies didn't, even when it made no strategic sense, even when mercy cost more than cruelty. Emiko didn't know this. She only knew that the Americans in front of her looked exhausted, uncomfortable. One was sweating despite cool basement air. They looked like men who wanted to be home, who were tired of war, who would rather be anywhere else. They didn't look like demons, and that was more terrifying than any violence could be. Because if they weren't demons, then what did that make the propaganda? What did that make 4 years of war? What did that make the cyanide capsule still hidden in Emiko's collar, waiting to be used? She lowered the rebar, slowly, hands shaking so badly the metal vibrated. She raised her palms, international gesture of surrender. Behind her, 46 women did the same. Weapons clattered against concrete. The sound echoed like everything they'd believed falling to pieces. The Marines moved forward carefully. No celebration, no triumph, just tired men doing a job. One knelt beside a woman too weak to stand, checked her pulse, called for the medic. Professional, gentle, wrong for what should be happening. They were led outside, first time in daylight for 6 weeks. Emiko's eyes watered. The sun was too bright, too real, too alive for a world that should be ending. Military trucks waited. Green, canvas covered, wire mesh over windows, prison transport. That made sense. Everything else was madness, but prison trucks made sense. April 1945, 4 months earlier, Manila, Philippines. The propaganda film flickered against white sheets hung on the barracks wall. Grainy, clearly staged, but effective, always effective, because fear doesn't require high production values. American soldiers dragging Japanese civilians into streets, women screaming, children crying, men beaten while others watched. The narrator spoke in clipped Tokyo dialect, clinical, detached, describing atrocities like weather reports. The American shows no mercy, no honor, no humanity. When captured women suffer degradation beyond words. Death preserves honor. Capture destroys it forever. The film showed more. Things that made grown women look away. Things designed to ensure that suicide seemed reasonable. That cyanide capsules seemed like gifts rather than instruments of despair. Emiko sat in the required front row. All medical personnel attended, no exceptions, no excuses. You watched, you learned, you internalized the message that Americans were monsters and capture was fate worse than death. Lieutenant Ishikawa stood when the film ended. Career officer, true believer. The kind of man who thought Bushido code was instruction manual rather than philosophy. You will each receive a cyanide capsule. Keep it with you, always. If capture becomes certain, use it. Do not dishonor your families. Do not shame the emperor. He expects this sacrifice. History demands it. The capsules were distributed, small, glass, wrapped in thin paper. Emiko held hers like it might explode. She had a daughter, Yuki, 7 years old, who drew pictures of cherry blossoms and dreamed of becoming a teacher. What would Yuki think if her mother chose poison over life? But what would Yuki think if her mother was captured? Defiled, destroyed, Emiko hid the capsule in her uniform collar, sewed it into a seam where she could reach it quickly. She never told anyone that she was terrified of using it. That fear of death was stronger than fear of dishonor. That she was fundamentally a coward who wanted to live even if living meant shame. Better a coward than dead, even if no one else agreed. 2 months later, Saipan's hospital took a direct hit. 47 women survived the collapse. They hid. They waited. They slowly starved. And now here they were, climbing into American trucks, prisoners, alive, dishonored. The truck bed was metal, cold even in tropical heat. 47 women packed onto benches along the sides. Canvas overhead blocking most of the view. But through gaps in the fabric, Emiko could see. Buildings standing, intact, windows with glass, doors on hinges, roofs that didn't leak. No bomb craters, no rubble, no skeletons of burned structures. Saipan had been battlefield 3 months ago, the entire island devastated by combat, but Americans had already rebuilt. Roads cleared and graded, power lines strung, street signs posted, the machinery of occupation humming efficiently. The truck passed through what looked like a small town, American military everywhere, walking, talking, laughing, normal human behavior, the routine of peace rather than war. And civilians, actual civilians, a woman carrying a basket, 2 children playing with a ball, a man on a bicycle, living as if war had never happened. As if death hadn't covered this island like fog just weeks ago. One child waved at the truck, actually waved, smiling, cheerful, as if enemy prisoners were ordinary rather than historic, as if Japanese women being transported to camps was just another Tuesday afternoon. Sakura Tanaka sat beside Emiko, 22 years old, radio operator before surrender. She had spent 2 years broadcasting propaganda to Japanese forces, telling them Americans were demons. That capture meant torture, that death was only honorable choice. Her voice had reached thousands, maybe tens of thousands, soldiers who heard her words and believed them, who chose death over surrender because Tokyo rose and voices like hers told them capture was worse than bullets. Now she pressed her face against canvas, watched Saipan roll past. Her voice came out broken, barely audible over engine noise. They're just people, the Americans. They're just people like us. Emiko had no response. What could she say? Yes, the enemy looks human. Yes, propaganda was lies. Yes, everything we believed was fiction, designed to keep us fighting past any reasonable hope of victory. Across from them, Midori Sato was crying, 28 years old, clerk, administrative work in Manila headquarters. Her husband had been infantry, Philippines campaign. No word in 6 months. Probably dead in some jungle, his body never recovered, his family never notified. She had held together through the bombing, through weeks of starvation, through the terror of discovery. But seeing American normalcy broke her, because it meant the war was truly over. Japan had truly lost, and life continued whether she participated or not. The truck stopped after 20 minutes. Canvas flaps opened. Bright sunlight flooded in. The women squinted, raised hands to shade their eyes, climbed down one by one. 2 were too weak to manage alone. Marines helped them, hands supporting arms, gentle, careful, wrong for what should be happening. Camp Stoneman. The sign was in English but clear enough. POW facility. Barbed wire around perimeter. Guard towers at corners. Armed soldiers at intervals. But the guards looked bored. One read a newspaper. Another smoked, leaning against a post. A third tied his boot, completely unconcerned with enemy arrivals. An officer approached. Female, maybe 38, medical insignia, captain's rank. Her face was professional, not cruel, not kind, just businesslike. The expression of someone with a job to do and limited time to do it. She spoke. The translator relayed. I am Captain Helen Wright, Chief Medical Officer. You will be processed. Medical examination. Housing assignment. You are protected under Geneva Convention. This means rights, food, shelter, medical care, humane treatment. Is this understood? 47 women stared, understanding individual words but not their combination. Prisoners had rights. Enemies received care. This violated everything they knew about war, about defeat, about reality. Captain Wright continued, Japan surrendered October 2nd, 3 weeks ago. You are no longer combatants. You await repatriation. We follow international law. You will not be harmed. You will not be abused. Clear. Emiko found her voice. What do you want from us? The question traveled through translation. Captain Wright's expression softened microscopically. Nothing. We want to process you correctly. Ensure your health until you return home. That's all. That's all. As if 4 years of propaganda could be dismissed with 2 words. As if complex realities of war and surrender and enemy and prisoner could be reduced to simple bureaucratic procedure. The processing building was long. Single story, harsh fluorescent lights overhead, tables in rows, medical equipment everywhere, scales, blood pressure monitors, stethoscopes. Female nurses waited at each station. American women in clean uniforms, hair neat, faces calm. They smiled when Japanese women entered. Genuine expressions. Welcome mixed with sympathy. One gestured for the first woman to approach. Hana Nakamura, 19 years old, youngest of the group, cook before the war ended. Now just terrified girl who shook so badly she could barely walk. 2 nurses met her, spoke softly through the translator, guided her to a chair like she was fragile rather than enemy. The examination was medical, professional. They checked eyes, throat, lungs. When they found infected sores on her arms from malnutrition and poor hygiene, they cleaned them gently, applied antiseptic that stung, bandaged carefully. One nurse squeezed Hannah's shoulder, sympathy in her touch. Hannah emerged 10 minutes later looking shell-shocked, like she'd braced for hell and found only routine health care instead. One by one, 47 women processed, each examination identical. When doctors found malnutrition, they noted it. When they discovered injuries, they treated them. When women flinched at touch, they slowed down, spoke softer, moved with exaggerated care. No one struck anyone. No one touched inappropriately. No one raised voices. The contradiction was crushing. Amico went last. Leaders go last. Ensure everyone else safe first. Old habits from nursing school, from managing staff, from being responsible when no one else wanted responsibility. Two nurses examined her knee, the one injured when the hospital collapsed, when she was carrying a wounded soldier downstairs and the building took another hit. 3 months of pain, reduced mobility, she'd learned to hide the limp, to function despite damage. The older nurse palpated the joint carefully, asked questions through translation. When did injury occur? What caused it? How severe is pain? Can you bend it fully? Imiko answered mechanically, still waiting for the trick. The moment kindness would reveal itself as strategy. It never came. The nurse made notes, consulted her colleague. They turned back to Amiko with professional expressions. You need to see our doctor, X-ray examination, possibly physical therapy. We schedule you for tomorrow morning. 900 hours. X-ray, advanced medical technology, treatment plan, physical therapy, for a prisoner, for an enemy, for someone who should be suffering rather than healing. Imiko's hands began shaking. She gripped the table edge, tried to steady herself. Her voice came out barely above whisper. Why are you doing this? The older nurse's face showed something like sadness. She spoke through the translator. Because you're human, because you're injured, because we can help. Those are sufficient reasons. After processing came something that destroyed the last of Amiko's psychological defenses. Bathing facilities, large building, steam rising from vents, the sound of running water audible from outside. The women exchanged glances. What fresh nightmare was this inside metal tubs lined walls, filled with water, steam rising, hot water, real hot water, the kind they hadn't experienced in months, since before Saipan fell, since before everything collapsed. Soap sat on shelves, white bars smelling like flowers, lavender maybe, clean towels stacked nearby, female nurses supervising. No mockery in their expressions, just routine professionalism. The translator explained the process. Remove clothing, wash thoroughly, clean garments provided after. 47 women undressed slowly, trying to maintain dignity. They had lived in caves, in ruins, in basement darkness. No proper washing for 6 weeks. No real bathing for months before that. The hot water was almost painful at first, too hot for skin that had forgotten warmth. But as they sank into tubs, as heat penetrated exhausted muscles, something inside them broke. Sakura submerged her head, came up gasping, water streaming down face mixing with tears, then sobbing. Not quiet crying, full body sobs that echoed off tile walls. Around her, other women broke down too, not from pain, from relief so intense it felt like injury, from the recognition that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't die today, that maybe the enemy was something other than what propaganda promised. American nurses watched with sad faces. One approached Sakura, knelt beside the tub, spoke softly in English. Incomprehensible words, but tone was clear. Compassion, comfort, human to human rather than victor to defeated. Amiko washed her hair for the first time in 2 months. The water at her feet turned gray, then brown, then almost black. She scrubbed skin until it was pink and raw, until individual nerve endings remembered sensation, until she felt almost human again. Clean cotton clothes waited when they emerged, simple, gray, whole. They dressed like the garments were sacred, like clean fabric was miracle rather than routine. Then came the final contradiction. The thing that shattered every remaining piece of their worldview. The mess tent. Smell reached them from 50 yards away. Rice, real rice, steaming, perfect. Something grilling that made Amiko's stomach clench with desperate hunger, made her mouth water, made her knees weak. Inside, American soldiers ate at tables on one side, section cleared for Japanese women on the other. Not cruel segregation, just organization. Practical spacing. The Americans ignored them mostly, focused on own meals and conversations. One glanced over, looked curious rather than hostile, went back to eating. Then food arrived. White rice, each grain separate, fluffy, perfect. The way rice should be, but hadn't been for years in war-starved Japan. Grilled mackerel, skin crispy, flesh tender, prepared correctly by someone who understood Japanese cooking. Miso soup, real miso soup. Proper dashi, correct proportions. Traditional technique, pickled vegetables. Tsukemono made right. Hot green tea in simple cups. This wasn't American food. This was Japanese food, prepared with care, for prisoners, for enemies, by people who had no obligation to do anything beyond keeping them alive. Amiko picked up chopsticks with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She hadn't seen a complete meal in 6 months. Rations on Saipan had become nothing. They'd eaten weeds, roots, anything digestible. 3 women died of starvation before surrender. She took a bite of rice. Perfect, warm, life itself in grain form. She closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Then she was crying into her bowl while trying to eat simultaneously. Salt water mixing with rice. Grief and gratitude inseparable. Around her, 46 women having identical breakdowns. Some ate slowly savoring. Others ate frantically, terrified food would vanish. A few couldn't eat at all, too overwhelmed by contradiction to function. Hana suddenly dropped her chopsticks, covered her face, began sobbing with sounds that made American soldiers look over, concerned. A nurse approached quickly, knelt beside her. The translator materialized. "What's wrong? Are you injured?" Hana shook her head, couldn't form words. Emiko answered for her. "She's confused. We were taught you would harm us. Instead, you feed us. Japanese food, prepared correctly. This makes no sense. Nothing makes sense anymore." The translator relayed this. The nurse's expression showed sadness. She patted Hannah's shoulder gently, stood, left them without judgment, just human acknowledgement of human suffering. Emiko continued eating. Each bite was confirmation that propaganda had been lies, complete fabrications. If Americans weren't demons about food, what else had been false? If they showed mercy, now what did that mean about the entire war, about Japan's justifications, about everything? The rice stuck in her throat, not from quality, from realization, from understanding that maybe the enemy was more humane than her own government had ever been, that maybe defeat was revealing truth that victory had hidden. That night, they were taken to barracks. Inside, cots lined walls. Each had thin mattress, pillow, folded blanket. After months on cave floors and concrete, the sight of beds made women stop in the doorway. They filed in slowly. Each chose a cot, sat carefully, tested mattresses like they might be illusion, touched pillows with disbelief. A young corporal entered, maybe 24, tall, farm boy build, Iowa or Nebraska probably. He hung a kerosene lamp from ceiling hook, said something in English, paused, couldn't think of anything else. Nodded, left. He didn't lock the door. That fact registered slowly. Unlocked door. They were prisoners in unlocked barracks. They could walk out. Not that they would, not that they could escape an island. But the symbolism mattered. They organized watches anyway. 4 awake, others attempting sleep. But sleep was impossible. Every sound triggered alarm. Footsteps, voices, trucks. Each noise meant potential danger. Midnight, footsteps approached. Multiple people, moving deliberately. Women sat up, hearts racing. Emiko stood, face set. Others picked up shoes, belts, anything. Prepared to fight if this was when kindness ended and brutality began. The door opened. 3 Americans. Two soldiers, Captain Wright, carrying bundles. Captain Wright spoke. Translator's voice followed. Temperature drops at night. We brought extra blankets and tea. They entered slowly, non-threatening, placed wool blankets on empty cots. One soldier had thermos and cups, poured hot tea, distributed to shaking buns. The translator spoke again. Sleep well. Then they left. Closed door quietly. No lecture, no demands, no conditions, just blankets and tea and concern for prisoner comfort. Long moment of stunned silence. 47 women frozen. Processing impossibility of what just occurred. Then Hannah laughed. Strange sound, hysterical edge, wrong for the moment, but also exactly right. Blankets, she said in Japanese. The enemy brought us blankets. Others began laughing too, sound mixing with crying. Bodies shaking with release of tension so profound it was almost violent. Not joy, not relief, something more complex. Recognition that everything they knew was wrong. That reality was stranger and kinder than propaganda allowed. That they were adrift in a world where enemies showed mercy and nothing made sense. Emiko wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Thick, warm, smelling faintly of storage and American efficiency. She held her teacup with both hands. Felt heat penetrate palms. That night they slept. Not easily, not deeply, but they slept. Wrapped in enemy blankets, in enemy beds, behind enemy guards who brought comfort instead of pain. And in that sleep something changed. Some fundamental understanding shifted. The recognition that maybe they had been wrong. That maybe enemies were human. That maybe defeat didn't equal destruction. That maybe mercy existed even in war. That realization was more terrifying than violence. Because it meant rebuilding understanding of reality from foundation up. Questioning everything. Accepting that the America they feared was fiction and the America that brought blankets was real. Morning came eventually. Dawn over Camp Stoneman. 47 women woke to their first full day as prisoners of an enemy that refused to be demons. An enemy that insisted on treating them like human beings deserving of dignity. Whether they were ready for that truth or not, it was the truth they would have to learn to live with. Days became routine. Surprisingly, impossibly, the kind of sameness that makes even strange circumstances feel normal through repetition. Wake at dawn, breakfast, rice and miso soup, sometimes eggs, sometimes fish, always hot, always enough. Work assignments posted on barracks wall. Voluntary, always voluntary. No punishment for refusal, no consequences beyond having nothing to occupy the mind. Most volunteered anyway. Idleness was harder than labor. Gave too much time to think, to remember, to wonder about families in Japan who might be dead, about husbands who probably might be, about daughters growing up without mothers, about everything lost and nothing gained. Emiko worked in the laundry facility, washing American uniforms, folding sheets. The work was hard, hot, anonymous, exactly what she needed. Her hands could work while her mind drifted, could process the impossible reality of being fed and housed and treated gently by people who should be enemies. They were paid, camp script, small amounts but actual payment for labor. Prisoners earning wages. The contradiction was almost funny if anything about this situation could be funny. The canteen was small, 10 shelves, basic items. But to women who had owned nothing, who had survived on scraps, it was abundance made visible. Chocolate bars sat on the second shelf, wrapped in bright paper. Hershey's, American chocolate. In Japan, chocolate had vanished years ago, everything rationed, then gone entirely. Children growing up never tasting sweetness beyond what nature provided. Emiko stood before the display, staring. After a week of work, she could afford one bar, just one. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. The wrapper crinkled. The weight felt substantial, real. She bought it, carried it back to barracks like treasure, placed it carefully in her footlocker. That night, she broke off a single square, let it melt on her tongue. Sweetness so intense it was almost painful. She thought of Yuki, 7 years old. Tokyo, if Tokyo still existed. If Yuki still existed, her daughter had never tasted chocolate. had never experienced this particular miracle of sugar and cocoa that Americans took for granted. Emiko wrapped the remaining chocolate carefully, saved it for what she didn't know, for hope maybe, for the possibility that someday she would see Yuki again and could give her this small piece of enemy kindness. November 5th, 1945, medical facility, day 15 of captivity. Dr. Thomas Bennett stood in his office, 32 years old, Army surgeon, tall, serious, the kind of man who carried responsibility like a physical weight across his shoulders, competent, efficient, emotionally unavailable by design rather than nature. Captain Helen Wright entered without knocking. She never knocked. Formality wasted time, and Wright believed time was the most valuable resource in any military operation. "You've been avoiding the Japanese ward." Bennett didn't look up from his paperwork. "They're receiving adequate care." "Adequate isn't the standard here. You're the best surgeon we have. Nurse Hayashi needs an x-ray evaluation. Her knee injury is severe. Send Richardson." "Richardson is competent. You're exceptional. And this is an order, doctor." Bennett's pen stopped moving. He looked up. Wright's face was professional, but her eyes held something else. Understanding. Compassion. The expression of someone who knew what she was asking and why it was difficult. "Tom, I know what you lost." Bennett's jaw tightened. "That's not relevant to this conversation." "It's entirely relevant. Your brother died at Pearl Harbor. These women are Japanese. I understand the connection you were trying not to make, but we follow the convention. We treat all patients equally. That's what separates us from them." Silence. Bennett's hands were steady, but his knuckles had gone white, gripping the pen. Wright continued, "David wouldn't want you to carry hate. You know that. He was better than that. Don't presume to know what my brother would want. Then prove me wrong. Treat Nurse Hayashi tomorrow. 0900. Show me your brother's death taught you something besides rage." She left. Bennett sat alone in his office, staring at nothing, thinking about David, 23 years old, ensign, USS Arizona, December 7th, 1941, entombed in the ship, body never recovered, just another name on a memorial wall, another casualty of Japanese aggression. And now he was supposed to treat a Japanese nurse, show her mercy, care for her injury, act like the enemy was human. The truly horrible part was knowing Wright was correct. David would have wanted mercy. David had been the good one, the kind one, the brother who believed in ideals while Thomas believed in results. David would have treated the enemy with compassion because that's who David was. Thomas was just angry. 4 years of anger, 4 years of wanting revenge, 4 years of watching wounded Americans return from Pacific theaters with stories of Japanese brutality, of prisoners starved and tortured, of death marches and labor camps, of systematic cruelty that made Geneva Convention seem like naive fantasy. But Wright had given an order. So tomorrow at 900 hours, Thomas Bennett would examine a Japanese nurse's knee and try to remember that medicine had no nationality, that his oath demanded he heal regardless of uniform, that David would have expected nothing less. He just wasn't sure he could do it without hating himself after. November 6th, medical facility, 0900 hours. Emiko arrived escorted by Lieutenant Dorothy Yamamoto, the Nisei translator, woman caught between two worlds, born American but looking Japanese, trusted by neither side fully but essential to both. Dr. Bennett was waiting, professional mask firmly in place, no emotion visible, just clinical efficiency. He gestured to the examination table, spoke to Yamamoto. "Tell her to sit, remove the shoe on her left foot. I need to examine the knee." Yamamoto translated. Emiko complied. Her movements were careful, betraying pain she tried to hide. Bennett noticed, cataloged it, relevant medical data, nothing more. The X-ray machine dominated one corner, large, intimidating. Technology that seemed almost magical to someone who had trained in pre-war Japan, where such equipment was rare outside major hospitals. Bennett positioned her leg carefully, adjusted the machine. His touch was professional, impersonal, the contact of doctor to patient rather than human to human. "She needs to remain completely still. Tell her the machine makes noise, but it's harmless." Yamamoto translated. Emiko nodded, didn't ask questions, just accepted. That was her pattern. Accept, endure, survive. The machine hummed, clicked, went silent. Bennett developed the image in the darkroom. Returned with the X-ray held up to light. The damage was clear. Torn cartilage, bone fragments, tissue inflammation, months-old injury healing incorrectly. Painful. Limiting mobility, the kind of damage that would cause chronic problems without proper treatment. Bennett studied the image, made notes. His face revealed nothing. Then he spoke to Yamamoto without looking at Emiko. How did this injury occur? Translation. Emiko's voice came soft, hesitant, like she expected punishment for answering. Bomb hit our hospital, staircase collapsed. I was carrying a wounded soldier. Fell with him. Bennett's hands paused on the X-ray. He looked at Emiko for the first time. Really looked. Not at a prisoner, at a person, a nurse, a colleague who had stayed with patients under fire. You were evacuating patients during the bombing. Yes, we couldn't leave them. Something shifted in Bennett's expression. Microscopic. Probably invisible to anyone who didn't know him well. But Yamamoto saw it. The moment when enemy became human. When the woman in front of him transformed from symbol into individual. Bennett returned his attention to the X-ray. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Still professional but warmer. Marginally more human. The cartilage damage is permanent, but I can help manage pain, physical therapy, anti-inflammatory medication, ice treatments. The knee won't be perfect, but it can be functional. He looked at Emiko directly. I'll make sure you receive the best care we can provide. Emiko's confusion was visible. Why so I am enemy prisoner? Bennett was silent for a long moment. Yamamoto waited, not translating, letting the question hang. Finally, Bennett spoke. No, you're a nurse. That matters more than flags. After Emiko left, Bennett sat alone with the X-ray, stared at the image of damaged joint, thought about a woman who stayed with patients during bombing, who carried wounded soldiers while her own knee was destroyed, who did what he would have done, what David would have done. The enemy was human. The realization was unwelcome, complicated, made everything harder. Because hating symbols was easy. Hating people who showed courage and compassion was impossible. He hated that Emiko had made him see her as human, hated that his oath demanded he treat her with care, hated that David's memory made mercy necessary rather than optional. But most of all, he hated that some part of him, some part he didn't want to acknowledge, was glad the enemy had turned out to be human after all. Camp life continued, routine deepening, making the strange familiar through repetition. No letters arrived from Japan, no news of families, cities, the war's aftermath. The women existed in information vacuum, knowing only what Americans told them through translators. Japan surrendered. Your country is occupied. Emperor spoke on radio, facts that felt fictional, impossible. Japan had never been occupied in history, never surrendered, never heard the emperor's voice. Sakura kept a diary, wrote every night by lamplight. Japanese characters flowing across paper, recording contradictions. Americans smile, offer cigarettes, treat us with casual friendliness. How can we hate kindness, but how can we accept it without betraying everything we believed? Emiko wrote letters she couldn't send. To Yuki, to her daughter who might be dead, who was probably alive but unreachable. Dear little flower, I don't know if you will ever read this, but I want you to know. The enemy is not what we were taught. They are people, complicated, capable of cruelty and kindness, just like us. She kept these letters in her footlocker, next to the chocolate. Both symbols of hope, both probably futile, both necessary for sanity. Midori Sato's depression deepened. The clerk, 28, husband missing in Philippines. She stopped eating, stopped talking, just sat in barracks staring at nothing. Captain Wright noticed, arranged counseling. Even prisoners deserve mental health care. Small human moments accumulated. Corporal Daniel Foster, the Iowa farm boy, tried teaching English. Pointed at objects, Said words. Cup, chair, friend, Sakura repeated. Friend, Foster grinned. Yes, friend. The interaction left Sakura off balance for hours. Normal human connection with enemy felt like betrayal, but also felt necessary. November 20th, Recreation Tent, Week 7. Captain Wright arranged a film screening. Not Hollywood entertainment, newsreel footage, documentary material. Truth delivered in black and white images. Japan, post-war, post-bomb, post-surrender. Hiroshima appeared on screen. Or what had been Hiroshima, now just rubble. Ash. Shadows burned into walls where people had stood when the flash came. Survivors wandering through ruins, looking for family, for food, for any reason to continue living. Nagasaki, different geography, same devastation. Complete, total. The kind of destruction that seemed biblical, apocalyptic, cities erased in single moments. Tokyo, miles of rubble from firebombing, neighborhoods reduced to nothing, children with burns, women searching ruins, men standing motionless staring at where homes used to be. 47 women watched in silence, many crying, some making sounds like wounded animals. This was homeland. This was what remained. This was where their families lived or had lived or died trying to live. Emiko thought of Yuki, 7 years old, somewhere in that rubble. If she existed, if Tokyo hadn't killed her, if starvation or disease or American bombs hadn't taken her daughter. Sakura thought of her neighborhood, certain it was gone. Everything familiar erased. Home, school, the shop that sold rice cakes, all transformed into ash and in memory. The Americans watching the same footage didn't look triumphant. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked sad. Private James Sullivan, 21 years old, got up and left. Face pale. Couldn't watch anymore. Couldn't process the scale of destruction, even when it was enemy destruction. They weren't celebrating, weren't boasting, just showing prisoners truth. Reality of war's cost. What victory looked like when you won by destroying cities. After the film ended, Captain Wright spoke through Yamamoto. The war is over. Japan is being rebuilt. Aid is coming. Food, medicine, and construction materials. We are no longer enemies. We're trying to help heal what war broke. Simple words, complicated meaning. 47 women processing impossibility. Enemies becoming helpers. Victors offering aid. Nothing made sense, but it was happening anyway. That night, Emiko couldn't sleep. Lay in her cot staring at ceiling. They destroyed my city, fed me chocolate, killed my people, healed my knee, which is real, both. Both were real. That was the unbearable part. December 14th, 1945. Storm warning. Meteorology report came in morning. Tropical storm approaching. Expected landfall tonight, heavy rain. Wind gusts 70 plus, flooding risk in low areas. Camp prepared, securing equipment, moving supplies, reinforcing structures. All non-essential personnel to shelters. Standard procedure. Routine emergency response. Japanese women's barracks sat in slight depression, lower than main facilities. Captain Wright ordered evacuation to main building. Most moved quickly, but some were too weak, too sick, too depressed to care about survival. Midori refused to move, the clerk who had given up. Let the storm take me. Better than this. Emiko stayed with her, trying to convince her. You must come. Your husband might be alive. You might see him again. He's dead. I know he's dead. I feel it. There's nothing to live for. Medical tent. Private Sullivan on duty, treating minor injuries from storm prep. Cut hand, twisted ankle. Nothing serious. He was alone. Everyone else evacuated. He should leave too. Would leave. Just needed to finish bandaging his own hand first. The roof beam cracked. Old structure, weak point in construction. Storm wind finding it, exploiting it. Sullivan looked up. Too late. Beam fell. Struck him. He went down. Unconscious. Trapped under debris. Head bleeding. Water starting to pool on floor as rain intensified. Emiko finally convinced Midori to move. They walked toward main building. Rain heavy, visibility poor. Then Emiko heard it. Crash from medical tent. Sound of something structural failing. She should keep walking. should get to shelter, should save herself in Midori. But she was a nurse, had been a nurse before the war destroyed everything, would be a nurse until death. That identity was stronger than nationality, stronger than prisoner status, stronger than fear. She changed direction, toward the medical tent. Midori grabbed her arm. Don't, it's not our concern. It's exactly our concern. We're nurses. We're prisoners. No, we're nurses who happen to be prisoners. There's a difference. Oh, inside the tent, water rising. Sullivan trapped, bleeding, unconscious. The beam across his chest was too heavy for Emiko to lift alone. She checked his pulse. Weak but present. Head wound bleeding steadily. If she left him, he would drown or bleed out. If she stayed, she might die too. She was enemy. He was American. She should let nature take its course. Should walk away, save herself. But he was a patient. She was a nurse. Nothing else mattered. She applied pressure to the head wound with torn fabric, shouted for help. Wind too loud. No one heard. She tried to lift the beam. Too heavy. Her damaged knee gave way. She fell. Got up. Tried again. Back at Japanese barracks, Sakura noticed Emiko missing. Where's Nurse Hayashi? Hana pointed. She went toward the medical tent. Sakura found Corporal Foster. Please, my friend is out there. Foster alerted to Bennett. Sir, Japanese nurse is missing. Private Sullivan didn't check in from medical tent. Bennett didn't hesitate. Didn't calculate. Didn't weigh American life against enemy presence. Just acted. Get a team now. Bennett, Foster, and 3 soldiers fought through storm, reached medical tent, found Emiko kneeling in water beside Sullivan, applying pressure to head wound. Her clothes soaked with rain and his blood, water to her waist. She looked up when they entered. No apology in her expression, just determination. He hit head, pulse weak, bleeding controlled but needs stitches. Bennett waded in, stared at enemy prisoner, saving American soldier, risking her life, not for strategy, for simple human decency, for the same reason he would have, for the same reason David would have. Ma'am, I've got him. Let me take over. Emiko didn't argue, moved aside. Professional deference, nurse to doctor, the hierarchy that transcended war. Can you help me lift this beam? On 3. Together they lifted. Bennett took Sullivan. Foster helped Emiko. They fought back through storm. Reached main building, examination table. Bennett worked fast, stitching head wound. Emiko assisted without being asked. Handed instruments, anticipated needs, professional synchronization. Watching soldiers stood stunned. She saved him. Enemy saved him. Sullivan stabilized. Bennett turned to Emiko. She was shivering, exhausted, knee clearly causing pain from the exertion. You risked your life for an American soldier. Why? Emiko's answer came through Yamamoto. Simple, direct. He was patient. I am nurse. Nothing else mattered. Bennett stared at her. This woman who did what he would have done, what his oath demanded, what David would have expected. Enemy and colleague weren't contradictions. They were both true. She was both true. Thank you. You saved his life. You would have done same. I'd like to think so, but I'm not sure I would have. For an enemy, you're better than I am. In that moment, Bennett understood. The enemy who killed David at Pearl Harbor and the nurse who saved Sullivan in the storm were different people. Hate and humanity could both exist, but he had to choose which one to honor. Had to decide what kind of man David's death would make him. He chose humanity, not because it was easy, because David would have expected nothing less. Next morning, storm passed. Sullivan woke, bandaged head, hospital bed, Captain Wright beside him. What happened? You were trapped. Japanese nurse found you, saved your life. Which one? Nurse Hayashi Emiko. Sullivan insisted on seeing her, brought in wheelchair. 47 women looked up when he entered. Sullivan spoke through Yamamoto. Which one is Nurse Hayashi? Emiko stepped forward, confused, nervous, expecting punishment maybe. Sullivan extended his hand. Thank you for saving my life. Emiko shook his hand. You're welcome. I'll never forget this. Never. That evening's special dinner. Captain Wright ordered extra rations, Recognition of heroism. Chocolate cake appeared. Rare treat, shared between Americans and Japanese. Lines blurring. Bennett sat near Emiko, spoke through Yamamoto. Your knee, how is it? Hurts, but I'm alive. Sullivan is alive. Worth it. Bennett took a breath. I need to tell you something. My brother died at Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, USS Arizona. He was 23. For 4 years, I've carried hate for everyone who wore your uniform. Emiko listened silently. Last night you showed me something. You showed me people are bigger than uniforms. You're a nurse. That's your truth. I'm a doctor. That's mine. War made us enemies, but medicine makes us colleagues. Emiko's voice was quiet. I am sorry about your brother. Truly. War took many brothers. I cannot undo that pain. I know, but you showed me something David would have wanted me to see. That people are people. That choosing humanity over hate honors the dead better than revenge. He was a good man. He would have liked you. Silence. Understanding passing between them. Two medical professionals. Once enemies. Now something else. Not quite friends, but no longer foes. Something new. Something without a name, but with meaning nonetheless. Bennett extended his hand formally. Thank you, Nurse Hayashi, for Sullivan, for showing me what I needed to see. Emiko shook his hand. Thank you, Dr. Bennett, for my knee, for treating me like human, for choosing what your brother would have wanted. They sat together, not talking, just existing in shared understanding. That war creates enemies, but humanity creates something stronger. That the choice between hate and compassion is always available, always difficult, always worth making. Outside, storm damage was being repaired. Inside, something else was being rebuilt. Not structures, something more fundamental. The recognition that enemies were temporary, but humanity was permanent. That dignity mattered more than victory. That mercy was strength rather than weakness. 47 women slept that night warmer than before. Not from blankets, from understanding that maybe, just maybe, the world contained more good than they'd been taught. That Americans were capable of cruelty and kindness. Just like Japanese. Just like all humans everywhere. And that recognition, uncomfortable as it was, felt like the beginning of something. Not peace exactly, but maybe the foundation on which peace could be built. One act of mercy at a time. One choice to see humanity at a time. One doctor and one nurse deciding that medicine mattered more than flags. It was a start. Small, fragile, but real. And sometimes real is enough. December 20th, 1945, 5 days after the storm, 6 days before Christmas. The camp canteen was busier than usual. American soldiers buying last-minute gifts to send home. Cigarettes for fathers, chocolate for children. Small luxuries that meant connection across distance. Reminders that war ended and normal life waited somewhere beyond military service. Emiko stood before the chocolate display. Again, third time this week, staring at the bright wrappers like they held answers to questions she couldn't articulate. She had earned more camp script, could afford multiple bars now, could buy chocolate for everyone in her barracks if she wanted, could hoard sweetness against uncertain future. But she only bought one, same as before, carefully, reverently, like ritual rather than transaction. Corporal Daniel Foster was restocking shelves, noticed her standing there. Farm boy from Iowa with kind eyes and easy smile. He'd gotten comfortable around the Japanese women, stopped seeing them as enemy, started seeing them as people who happened to be on wrong side of history. You really like chocolate, huh? His voice was friendly, curious rather than judgmental. Emiko's English had improved. Dorothy Yamamoto's lessons paying off. She could manage simple conversations now. For daughter, Tokyo, name Yuki. Foster's smile widened. You have a daughter. How old? Emiko held up 7 fingers, the universal language of mathematics transcending barriers of tongue and nation. 7. That's a good age. What's her name mean? Yuki means snow, also mean happiness. Flower name and different character. I hope she is happy. I hope she sees snow again. Foster's expression grew sad. I hope you see her again soon. I'm sure she misses you." Emiko nodded, couldn't speak. Throat too tight, she paid for the chocolate, carried it back to barracks, added it to the small collection in her footlocker. 3 bars now, saved for homecoming. Saved for the moment she could give Yuki first taste of sweetness in years. Could tell her daughter that American enemies became something else. That chocolate represented transformation. That night she wrote another unsent letter. "Dear Yuki-chan, I have chocolate for you. Real American chocolate. Sweeter than anything in our destroyed city. But more than chocolate, I have story. About enemies who brought blankets. About doctor who healed me. About soldier I saved. About how hate and humanity can live in same people. And how we must choose which one to honor." She folded the letter, stored it with the chocolate. Both precious, both impossible gifts. Both proof that humanity survives even war. Medical facility, Bennett's office, late evening. He was writing, not medical notes, personal correspondence. Letter he'd been avoiding for months. "Dear Mom, I know it's been weeks since I wrote. I need to tell you about something. About David, about moving forward." His handwriting was neat, precise, years of medical documentation training his hand to clarity. But these words were harder than any diagnosis, required different kind of precision. "I met a Japanese nurse, enemy prisoner. She saved an American soldier's life during storm, risked everything. I watched her work. Professional, skilled, compassionate. She reminded me why I became a doctor." He paused, pen hovering over paper, thinking about how to say what needed saying without causing more pain. "I realized something about David. He didn't die so I could carry hate for 4 years. He died hoping for better world. World where people choose humanity over vengeance. Where enemies can become colleagues. Where medicine matters more than flags." His hand continued, words flowing easier now. Confession becoming catharsis. "I'm not saying I forgive Pearl Harbor. I'm saying I forgive myself for being human. For seeing enemy as person. For choosing to honor David by being kind of man he'd be proud of. I think he would have liked Nurse Hayashi. I think he would have understood why mercy matters." He signed the letter, sealed it, would mail it tomorrow. His mother deserved to know her son was healing, that David's death hadn't destroyed him, that grief was transforming into something useful rather than remaining poison. Bennett's routine changed, visited Japanese ward daily, treated patients personally, learned basic Japanese medical terms, itai for pain, daijoubu for okay, arigato for thank you, small words building bridges. Emiko helped him learn, corrected pronunciation, explained nuances, their professional relationship deepening into mutual respect. Not friendship exactly, something more complex, recognition between equals who happen to wear different uniforms. Sergeant William Crawford noticed. 35-year-old combat veteran, skeptical by nature and experience. He'd fought across Pacific, seen Japanese brutality firsthand, struggled with the camp's humanitarian approach. "You spending a lot of time with the Japs, Doc." Bennett didn't look up from patient notes. "They're patients. I'm a doctor. That's how it works. After what they did to our boys, Pearl Harbor, Bataan, Death March, all those camps." Bennett stopped writing, looked at Crawford directly. "After what we did to Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Tokyo firebombing, at some point, Sergeant, the math of revenge stops working. Someone has to choose different. Might as well be us." Crawford had no response. Never thought of it that way. The logic was simple but profound. Revenge was infinite. Mercy had to start somewhere. Why not here? Why not now? Slowly, Crawford's attitude shifted, started treating Japanese women with basic courtesy, called them by name instead of prisoner, held doors, said excuse me when passing. Small gestures, but small gestures accumulate, become culture, become new normal. January 15th, 1946. An assembly called. Prisoners required attendance. Captain Wright stood before 47 women. Professional expression, but something in her eyes suggested this announcement mattered. Changed thing. Marked ending of one chapter and beginning of another. She spoke. Dorothy Yamamoto translated. Words falling into silence, heavy with anticipation. The War Department has finalized repatriation schedule. Ships are being prepared. Within 6 weeks, you will return to Japan. The words should have brought joy, relief, excitement. Instead, they crashed through the room like grenades, exploding assumptions, destroying the fragile equilibrium 47 women had built. Return home meant survival, but home meant destruction. Japan meant Yuki, but also devastation. Safety meant leaving enemy camp that had become something else. Something without proper name, but with meaning nonetheless. Emiko felt her chest tighten, relief and grief mixing. She would see Yuki again. Maybe. If Yuki was alive, if Tokyo was survivable, if home still existed in any meaningful sense. But leaving meant abandoning this strange place where enemies had become humans, where Americans had shown mercy, where reality had proved more complex than propaganda allowed. Sakura turned to Emiko that night, both lying in their cots, speaking quietly in darkness. I should be happy, going home, but I'm scared. I know, I feel same. What if home doesn't exist anymore? What if family is gone? Here at least I know what to expect. At least I'm safe. Emiko had no answer. Same fears haunted her, same contradictions. Missing enemy camp felt like betrayal. But Yuki was there. Daughter was there. Home was there. Had to go back. Had to rebuild. Had to try. Preparation began. Women given travel supplies, clean clothes, toiletries, basic medical supplies. Each received care package, canned goods, chocolate, first aid kit. Captain Wright's voice was firm. For journey and arrival, Japan has little food now. This will help. Emiko realized Americans were providing for their families. Former enemies ensuring former enemies' loved ones had resources. Circle of kindness extending beyond camp. Beyond war, into future. She looked at her care package. 3 chocolate bars inside, adding to the 3 she'd saved. 6 total, enough to share. Enough to show Yuki and neighbors that Americans were capable of generosity. That victory didn't require cruelty. February 28, 1946. Last night in Camp Stoneman. No official ceremony plan. No formal farewell. Just people spending final evening together. Recognizing that something meaningful had happened here. Something worth acknowledging, even if no protocol existed for it. Corporal Foster brought his harmonica, played American folk songs. Oh, Susanna, Home on the Range. Songs about wide spaces and freedom and belonging. Some Japanese women hummed along, didn't know words but understood melody. Music transcending language. Gifts were exchanged. Unofficial. Spontaneous. People giving what little they had because giving mattered more than keeping. Sakura gave Foster origami cranes. 1,000 folded from paper over months. Each one a prayer for peace, each one a wish for a world without war. For you, for kindness. Foster held the paper birds carefully, like they were fragile, like they were precious. I'll keep these forever. Thank you. Midori, the clerk who had wanted to die in the storm, gave Sergeant Crawford embroidered handkerchief. Cherry blossoms stitched with borrowed thread. Weeks of work. Thank you for teaching me hope still exists. Crawford, gruff combat veteran, had tears in his eyes. You taught me something too, ma'am. Taught me that enemy is just person on other side of line someone else drew. Bennett found Emiko sitting apart, holding her chocolate, contemplative, processing impending departure. He approached, spoke through Dorothy, who had become ever-present translator and friend to both sides. Mind if I sit? Please. They sat in comfortable silence. 2 people who had become something neither expected. Not quite friends, more than colleagues. Proof that enemies could transform into humans if given chance. Bennett spoke first. Tomorrow you go home. I'm glad. You'll see your daughter. Yes, but also sad. Strange to be sad leaving prison. This wasn't really prison, or you weren't really prisoners. I don't know what to call it. Emiko thought. Liminal space between war and peace, between hate and humanity, between enemy and friend. Bennett smiled, rare expression. Friend, I like that word. Emiko opened 1 chocolate bar, broke it in half, offered half to Bennett. I saved this for daughter, but now I think chocolate is not about taste, is about what it represents. Share with me. Bennett took the half. They ate together in silence. Sweetness melting on tongues. Moment simple but profound. Communion of sorts. Shared experience transcending everything that should have kept them separate. Bennett swallowed. I need to give you something too. He pulled out small leather journal. Worn, well used. Pages filled with neat handwriting and anatomical drawings. This was my brother David's, from Naval Academy. Medical notes. He wanted to be doctor like me. Never got the chance. Emiko's eyes widened. I cannot take your brother's book. Please, I want you to have it. When you rebuild Tokyo Imperial Hospital, use his knowledge. Let David's dream of healing live through you. Let his death mean something beyond grief. That's best way to honor him. Emiko accepted with deep bow, traditional Japanese gesture of profound respect. I will honor David Bennett. I promise his knowledge will heal Japanese patients. Enemy brother helping former enemy heal. This is peace, Bennett's voice was thick. This is peace, not treaties, not signatures, this. People choosing to see humanity in each other. They sat watching stars. Saipan sky clear, beautiful, war over. Peace beginning. Not in documents, but in moments like this. In choices like this. In small acts of mercy that accumulated into something larger. Emiko whispered, I will never forget you, dear Bennett. Never forget what you taught me. That medicine is bigger than nations. That humanity is choice we make every day. I'll never forget you either, Nurse Hayashi. You saved more than Sullivan. You saved me. From hate, from bitterness, from becoming someone David wouldn't recognize. They embraced. Brief, awkward, profound. Former enemies, current friends, proof that people could choose better, could be better, could transform hate into something useful. October 23rd, 1975. Saipan, 30 years to the day. The memorial stood where Camp Stoneman once existed. Bronze plaque, simple words, complex meaning. Japanese delegation arriving for unveiling ceremony. American veterans gathering. Children and grandchildren present. Witnesses to history meeting witnesses to transformation. Emiko stepped off the plane. 64 years old now, gray hair, dignified bearing. Years of work rebuilding Tokyo Imperial Hospital, visible in her posture. Confidence earned through service, through choosing to honor David Bennett's memory by healing. Beside her walked Yuki, 37 years old, doctor like her mother, inspired by stories of American mercy, by chocolate given in prisoner camp, by enemies who became humans. Dr. Thomas Bennett waited at arrival gate, 62 now, semi-retired but still practicing. Never married, dedicated life to medicine, to honoring David through healing, through choosing mercy over revenge every single day for 30 years. They saw each other across crowded terminal. Recognition instant despite decades, despite gray hair and age lines, despite everything that should have made strangers of them. They walked toward each other, slowly, deliberately, aware that others watched, that this moment mattered beyond personal reunion, that they represented something larger. They embraced, long, tight like old friends, like families separated by distance and time finally reunited. Emiko pulled back, smiled. You look old, Dr. Bennett. Bennett laughed, real laugh. You look distinguished, Nurse Hayashi. This is my daughter Yuki, doctor-like her mother should have been. Yuki bowed deeply, perfect Japanese courtesy. Dr. Bennett, my mother told me everything, about Storm, about chocolate, about how you saved her by seeing her as person rather than enemy. Bennett introduced his companion. This is Stephen Sullivan. You remember Private Sullivan? Sullivan stepped forward. 51 now, hospital administrator, successful, alive because enemy nurse chose mercy over self-preservation. Nurse Hayashi, I've wanted to thank you properly for 30 years. Emiko's eyes filled with tears. You survived. You thrived. That is thanks enough. Because of you, I have wife, 3 kids, grandchild coming, all because you didn't leave me in that tent. Your hero. Emiko shook her head. not hero. Just nurse doing mom, same as I would do for anyone. Bennett's voice was soft. That's what makes it heroic. You didn't calculate, didn't weigh American life against Japanese safety, just acted, because that's who you are. The memorial unveiling drew crowd, veterans, civilians, families, people who remembered war, people born after it ended, all gathering to witness recognition of something important, something that needed remembering. The plaque read, "In memory of 47 Japanese women held as prisoners of war at this site October 1945 through February 1946, and in honor of American military personnel who, following Geneva Convention, treated these prisoners with dignity, medical care, and humanity." This site represents principle that how we treat those in our power defines our civilization. May future generations remember peace begins when we choose to see humanity in our enemies. Captain Helen Wright spoke first. 68 now, retired, but still carrying herself like commanding officer, still believing rules mattered. That mercy was strength. I enforced convention because it was right, not easy. Right. These women taught me that our enemies are not monsters. They're people caught in circumstances beyond control, people who deserve dignity, people who, given chance, show us best of humanity. Emiko spoke next, in English, fluent after 30 years of teaching Japanese students about American mercy. 30 years ago, I stood in basement with sharpened spoon ready to die. Marines brought medical kit, not rifle. That moment changed my life. Her voice carried across crowd, strong, clear. Everything I believed shattered. Everything I feared proved wrong. I learned that propaganda is disease, makes us see humans as demons. But truth is simple. We are all just people, capable of terrible things, capable of beautiful things. War brings out worst. Peace brings out best. Dr. Bennett showed me medicine has no nationality. Corporal Foster showed me kindness has no enemy. Captain Wright showed me law matters even in war. They didn't owe me humanity. They gave it anyway because that's who they chose to be. Standing ovation. Americans and Japanese together. Proof that reconciliation was real. That time could heal if people chose healing. After ceremony, smaller gathering. Emiko Bennett, Yuki Sullivan Wright, sitting at Memorial Garden, talking quietly, sharing memories. Emiko reached into her bag, pulled out something wrapped carefully in silk cloth, unwrapped to reveal chocolate bar. Old, vintage packaging, perfectly preserved. This is chocolate I bought in Furan with camp script. Last bar I saved, never gave to daughter, kept it for this moment. Yuki looked surprised. Mother, you never told me. Because it was never for you, it was for this, for now. Reminder of lesson learned. That sweetness comes from unexpected places. That enemy can become friend. That hate is choice, and so is love. She broke chocolate into pieces. One for Bennett, one for Wright, one for Sullivan, one for Yuki, one for herself. This chocolate is 30 years old. Probably tastes terrible now. But we eat together anyway because chocolate was never about taste, was about what it represents. They each took piece. 30-year-old chocolate, stale certainly, but symbolic absolutely. They ate together. Bennett spoke first. You're right. Tastes awful. Everyone laughed. Genuine, unforced. Joy in shared absurdity. Wright raised her piece. But best chocolate I've ever had, Sullivan added, to Nurse Hayashi, who taught me life is gift, to be honored, to be lived well. Bennett continued, to all who choose humanity, even when hate is easier, even when kindness makes no sense, even when enemy stands before us and we choose to see person instead. They ate stale chocolate, sweetness gone, meaning amplified. Legacy built on small choices accumulating into transformation. Sunset on Saipan. Emiko and Bennett walking along beach where camp once stood, now memorial and park. Children playing, families picnicking, peace made visible. Do you regret it? The war. The camp, all of it, Emiko thought before answering. I regret war. Yes. So much death, so much pain. But camp taught me most important lesson. People are not their nations. People are their choices. I chose to save Sullivan. You chose to heal me. Captain chose to enforce convention. Small choices, but they rippled, became this. She gestured to memorial, to peace, to children playing where prisoners once suffered. Bennett nodded. My brother died at Pearl Harbor. For years I thought his death was meaningless. Waste. But now I see David died so I could learn this lesson. His death gave me chance to choose humanity, to honor him by being better, by seeing enemy as human. They sat on bench, watching waves, thinking about 30 years, about chocolate and medical journals, about blankets brought at midnight, about storms and choices. What happens now? We're old, say. Memorial is built. Story is told. Now we make sure it's remembered. Your daughter is doctor. Teach her to tell story. Make sure next generation knows enemies are temporary. Humanity is permanent. Emiko smiled. Yuki will tell her children, and they will tell theirs. Story of basement and blankets. Story of chocolate that changed lives. Story of enemies who became friends by choosing mercy over hate. Final image. Two elderly people on bench, watching sunset paint sky in colors that belong to no nation. Former enemies, current friends. Living proof that reconciliation was possible, that mercy mattered, that humanity could survive anything if people chose to honor it. Emiko's last words carried across water. Simple, profound, universal. We were taught to hate. We chose to heal instead. That is story worth telling. Boo Bennett's response was equally simple, equally profound. Forever. The story ended there, and also never ended. It lived in daughters, in grandchildren, in every person who heard it and chose to be kinder. In every moment, someone extended mercy when vengeance was easier. In every instance of seeing enemy as human rather than symbol. It lived in small acts, a hug in medical facility, a dictionary given as gift, origami cranes folded with hope, clean clothes offered with dignity, hair washed with gentle hands, chocolate shared across enemy lines. It lived in the lesson that winning war meant nothing if you lost peace, that true victory came not from crushing enemy, but from helping them stand. That measure of nation wasn't weapons but mercy, wasn't power but compassion. It lived in promise that we can always choose, hate or kindness, revenge or reconciliation, cruelty or compassion. The choice is always ours. The choice always matters. This was the story. This was the truth. This was what happened when 47 Japanese women stood with sharpened spoons, expecting death, and received blankets instead. When America responded not with cruelty, but with care. Not with punishment, but with patience. Not with hate, but with humanity. This was what happened when people chose to be better than circumstances required. Better than history suggested. Better than propaganda allowed. This was what happened when kindness broke hate, and the world was changed, one chocolate bar at a time, one medical examination at a time, one choice at a time, forever.